This is the Education Gadfly Show.
Welcome to the Education Gadfly Show. I'm Stephanie Disler, here to kick things off for this week's episode. Today, we're joined by Ben Austin, founding director of Education Civil Rights Now, to discuss how Democrats have lost their way on education policy and why embracing reform could help the party win national elections again. Then, on the Research Minute, Adam looks at a new study on state takeovers of school districts, who benefits, and how they affect district finances. All this and more on the Education Gadfly Show, starting now.
Hello, this is your host, Mike Petrilli of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, here at the Education Gadfly Show and online at fordhaminstitute.org. Now, please join me in welcoming my special guest for today, Ben Austin. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. It's great to be here.
Yeah, zooming in from sunny Southern California. You are very, very lucky.
Yeah, except we're ground zero for a constitutional crisis, but that's a conversation for another day.
Well,
sunny day.
You can't have everything. All right.
Exactly.
And joining us from rainy Washington, D.C., my co-host, David Griffith.
Hey, Mike. Always a pleasure. Hey, listen, it's sunny here, too. I feel like DC never gets the credit it deserves. It is incredibly sunny in July and August in DC.
Yeah, I used to live in DC, and DC is absolutely spectacular 2.5 weeks out of the year. So just lean in, David, while you've got it.
And you never know when those 2.5 weeks are going to be. That's what makes
They sneak up on you.
They do. I just got stuck in a huge rainstorm, just like 10 minutes from my house. And now here it's like totally dry. And you're saying it's sunny down in DC. I don't know, David, this is crazy. Let's not talk about the weather, though, because we've got too much other stuff to cover. First of all, I should do a proper introduction for Ben. Ben is the founding director of Education Civil Rights Now, which tell us about that, Ben, and tell us a little bit about your ed reform journey, because like me, you've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, I have been doing this a long time, and I was reflecting right before I got on this podcast that I knew you, Mike, back in the day before I knew what a charter school was. I was a Democratic Party, political hack. Basically, I was working in the White House for Bill Clinton, and you were already way, way down this nerdy rabbit hole. So you're ahead of me on this journey, but. I guess I would say the first part of my career was focused on Democratic Party politics. I worked in the Clinton White House. I was the comms director at the 2000 Democratic National Convention, and I worked on 5 Democratic presidential campaigns, including Kamala Harris's campaign. But you and I have also worked together on a lot of ed reform projects. We can get into them, but Parent Trigger, that gave parents the power to turn around failing schools through community organizing. I worked on the Bagara civil rights education litigation, which I think trees up to the conversation we're having right now, because the defendant, I helped about 10 years ago, I helped 9 students sue the state of California, basically claiming that the quality of education they were receiving was so poor that it was violating their constitutional rights. And the goal is to create a constitutional right to quality public education for all kids in California through impact litigation. And the defendant in that litigation just so happened to be Kamala Harris, because she was at the time the attorney general in California. And so we won at the lower level, and I know you spent a lot of time writing about this case, and it was sort of a game changer. I mean, in that legal opinion, the judge wrote that the facts shocked the conscience for how the status quo is educating our children, and that their rights were being violated, and then it required radical changes in the way California goes about educating their children. And Kamala Harris allowed the teachers union to join that litigation as co-defendants, and then worked with them to appeal that case up to the Supreme Court. And she made the argument, and at the Supreme Court, she had to concede, or her lawyers had to concede, that we had proven that children in California were being royally screwed by the system. There was just too much data to back that up. And in court, you can't talk in slogans or conspiracy theories. You have to use, data that you can admit under the rules of evidence. And her argument was that even though kids are getting screwed, because they don't have an explicit right written with those words into the California Constitution, that they effectively have no rights not to be screwed over. And the court overturned that ruling by one vote. And so if you fast forward then to the pandemic, I was a public school parent, an LAUSD parent during the pandemic. And the LAUSD, because of teachers union politics, and we're going to get to Democratic Party politics in a second, but teachers unions, largely control major aspects of the state and national Democratic Party machinery. And I say that as, an insider. The teachers unions kept our schools closed, kept my daughter's schools closed for 18 months. My daughters didn't go to school for 18 months. And parents during that time sued the LAUSD to try to make the argument in court that we as parents had a right for our children to go to school. And the LAUSD, in their legal pleadings, in their reply, they said the quiet part out loud. They cited Kamala Harris's arguments in Bagara, and they said that because students have no right to a quality education, parents have no right to ask the LAUSD to reopen our schools or to do anything else, that we get what we get and we don't get upset. And, for Biden and Harris, the Biden and Harris administration, that was the status quo for parents and children in America. And, the last thing I'll say, and then we can kind of dive into whatever rabbit holes you want, is that even though I was, I've literally sued Kamala Harris. I was a paid staffer on her campaign. I was traveling all around the country with her vice presidential nominee, Tim Walz. And I did that in part because Biden wasn't running a campaign. They needed experienced campaign operatives all of a sudden kind of to go 0 to 60 and have a campaign operation as they reached out to sort of Clinton administration alumni. And so I signed up to do it. And, I was mostly traveling around small towns in Wisconsin with Governor Walz. And the only education policy I heard about from voters was about Kamala Harris was trans kids playing sports. That, politics abhors a vacuum. She literally had no K-12 policy. She certainly had no K-12 policies that relates to school choice. And so, Trump conveniently filled that vacuum. And so here we are now. And this, I think, goes back to your kind of original kind of point about like where the Democratic Party is on this stuff, where, in the past, where Democrats who support school choice, especially high quality charter schools, would just get kind of swatted away. The teachers union in California, literally not figuratively, put my face on a billboard next to Donald Trump's face. That's just their easy, and now, honestly, like we're in this mess because of them, because of status quo Democrats who engineered the situation we're in now. And we all got on board. I signed up to help the Kamala Harris campaign because I believe in democracy and other things. But here we are, and there's a new opportunity to reset the politics of public education in the party. Now I'll shut up.
Ben, you're such a great podcast host. You just press play and Ben goes. I love it.
You're welcome, Mike.
That was the segment we call Introducing the Guest. So now let's do the segment we call Ed Reform Update. Okay, Ben. No, this is great. Thank you for getting into all that. So let's keep going. And the question is, in the debate and the argument you've been making, and a couple of pieces for The Hill, which we'll put in the show notes, you've been arguing that not only is education reform the right thing to do for Democrats, that it's the electorally smart thing to do. And I'm interested in that because, look, everybody knows the Democratic Party is way in the dumps right now in terms of public opinion. But it also seems like, somebody making a case for ed reform, it feels very, here you are, Ben, you're from the Clinton campaign. You're like from the 90s. It feels like a throwback This is a party that now has a lot of energy on the left with progressives, right? And from the outside, as somebody who's not inside that, it seems like it's just impossible. There's no way in the foreseeable future that you're going to get anybody like a Barack Obama or a Bill Clinton to get through the primary with an education reform message because the unions and the rest of the left are just too strong. So maybe if you did, maybe then they could have a chance in the general. But you are an eternal optimist. So give us that argument that this is possible. We could have hope for a candidate like that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, tell me to shut the F up whenever you want. You know, I think it's just, you know, conversations with values aligned Democrats who support school choice, before the 2024 election, you know, when something like this, hey, values aligned Democrat, do the right thing for kids, even though you're going to get totally screwed politically in the Democratic Party. And, you know, we see how well that message works when you're trying to build a political movement. I mean, it's why the Democratic Party is, you know, a party of no choice of any kind effectively right now. But, you know, the conversation now is different. It's, hey, values aligned Democrat, are you interested in winning? You know, because I think fundamentally we've all been gaslit for the last 10 years by the Randi Weingartens of the world that somehow swing voters in the ironically now named blue states, you know, support choice and freedom for everything except schools. I mean, it's just not intuitive. I mean, there's polling data to back it up, but that's not even the point. It's just quite obvious. And so, you know, when you kind of zoom back and look at, you know, Mike, you and I are older than David. So when you look at just our entire lifetime of Democratic presidents, the presidents who win and serve 2 terms are ed reformers. The presidents who don't serve 2 terms are not, and the every other nominee who lost wasn't an ed reformer. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think it's necessarily, I think maybe we're asking the wrong questions, because I don't think it's only that, you know, public school parents are electing presidents. I think that it's ed reform. You know, we even got in our community, if you go to a pie conference these days, like people don't even say the word reform because it freaks out the status quo and we're afraid of pissing them off. You know, Democrats who win are reformers. You mentioned Clinton and Obama. I mean, they were, you know, Clinton was that was his brand, and Obama maybe sort of backed into it because Hillary had already taken the institutional lane in '08. But they both ran as ed reformers and directionally as outsiders. And that's how we win. So the question isn't, do you support charter schools or you want to do the right thing for kids? The question is, we agree, hey, Randi Weingarten, we agree that democracy is on the ballot in 2028. Do you want to win or do you want to lose? That's just a different conversation.
So, what then might happen between now and then for interested people that could actually result in a reform-minded candidate that, again, could get through the gauntlet of the Democratic primary?
Well, I mean, I think the good news, and if you're a Democrat, there's not a lot of good news these days. But the good news is that there are like kind of an embarrassment of riches when it comes to values aligned Democrats who are either national leaders or 2028 presidential contenders. I mean, you know, Cory Booker, Jared Polis, Josh Shapiro, Rahm Emanuel, Gina Raimondo. I mean, these are all, you know, high profile national Democrats who have, you know, maybe even Pete Buttigieg, who have a record of either, you know, kind of playing around in the reform lane or, you know, taking some real like shots for supporting high quality charter schools. There just isn't a gravitational pull within the party right now to make the water warm for Democrats like that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that there's real work that is beginning. We're sort of building an airplane while it's in the air, but just to kind of build some support structures for Democrats that want to challenge the status quo, want to run as reformers, and want to win in 2028 and take back the White House. You know, we're going to support them.
So, David, are you feeling hopeful?
I am a fellow optimist, Mike, so I always feel hopeful. Um, yeah, look, I think the first thing I would say is that the political confidence intervals are almost always wider than people think they are, right? If you go back a decade, not a lot of people predicted that Donald Trump would be a two-term president, right? It seemed almost ludicrous when he was challenging Hillary, and we don't need to rehash the exact sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, but it's fair to say that things that were considered unlikely came to pass um, because of a certain confluence of events, or if you want to call it political talents. I guess I'll acquiesce to that at some level, right? So, uh, you know, that's what we're missing here, right? We're missing someone with some real political talents. I'm not exactly sure who they are. You mentioned a lot of good people, honestly, Ben, that I would co-sign on. But we just need someone to come along and show us how it's done. And we were about one bona fide leader away from this being totally realistic again, in my opinion. People just they chronically underestimate the entrepreneurial nature of American politics. They think things are impossible. It always fascinates me when political parties do things that aren't in their own self-interest. Because it
Right.
happens all the time, and it seems contrary to the incentives that politicians face, right? And my tentative conclusion is that most politicians are cowards, but they don't have to be. So we need some actual courage. We need someone to stand up for kids. We need someone to stand up to our own interest groups, and we need them to have a little bit of game. That's all it's really going to take.
All right. And now one more big political science question, right? I mean, does this person have to be a so-called moderate, right? I mean, the thing about Obama when he ran was that he wasn't running as a moderate. We think of him now as being pretty centrist. But like you said, Ben, he was an outsider and he was even in the progressive lane. I mean, compared to Hillary Clinton, and he was against the Iraq War and he had taken some positions to her left. Now people talk about centrist Democrats as being the establishment, right? I mean, so, is it have to be somebody? Some of those names you said are definitely in that centrist lane, or could it be somebody who could somehow bring together the centrists and the progressives? I mean, does it have to be an anti-progressive, I guess?
It's such a great question, Mike, because like I think that the 20th the political spectrum is like a relic of the 20th century right now. I mean, it doesn't really describe what's going on here. I think left and right is a lot less useful than do you want to solve problems on planet Earth or somewhere else? I mean, we need a round Earth party that just acknowledges reality. And in the context of public education, our schools are failing. I mean, I'm not a moderate. I'm a lefty progressive. I just think that and I support big government. I just think that the purpose of government should be to serve people, not public employee unions. And that sounds like common sense, but it gets you kicked out of, the cool kids club of the Democratic Party. And so, fundamentally, David, you were mentioning like we need courage, and I don't think we're going to get courage. I mean, we might get, one or two brave politicians, but I don't think that's the path. I think the reason there's an opening for a new debate here, and I appreciate you all, hosting it here on this important podcast, is that this isn't about courage. It's about winning. Do you want to win? And, we just lost running the status quo play. Maybe we should look at the last, 50 plus years of history and do something else.
Well, and you are very much hitting on something that is true about the Democratic Party, it seems like, which is that voters in the Democratic Party do care about electability, right? I mean, it didn't seem like Joe Biden had much of a shot back in 2020, but, voters were convinced that he was the one that could beat Trump. And so they went for it.
Yeah.
So,
And I
it
think
makes sense to make this argument, both on the merits, but also on the electability argument.
I was just going to say, I think that the Trump's ESA bill actually brings this conversation from like the theoretical into just, that is a political landmine for Democrats if they think that being flat-footed on school choice is a great answer to, hey, parents, here's a lot of money, go to whatever school you want to go to. I mean, I think that creates a real opening for charter school supporters in particular to triangulate against, on the one hand, Trump's kind of, ESA plan, which I think is like kind of free market gone wild. And then on the other hand, the status quo Democrats of Biden and Harris who think, you just get what you get and you don't get upset. High quality public charter schools could, be this sort of Goldilocks solution for Democrats in a way that they've been framed within the party for the last decade as a threat to public education. They may, in fact, be the path back to relevance for Democrats when it comes to public education.
That is a great place for us to end it. Ben Austin, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was fantastic. Again, Ben is the founding director of Education Civil Rights Now. And Ben, we'll have to do this sometime again soon. Enjoy sunny California.
Thank you, Mike. Great to meet you, David.
All right, now it's time for everyone's favorite Adams Research Minute. Adam, welcome back to the show.
Great to be back.
We're just talking with Ben Austin, living in Venice Beach, California. Got the surfboards behind him and everything. You're in a little bit of a nondescript home office in beautiful Oklahoma. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
What's wrong with that description, David?
It's fair. It's not nice, but fair.
Oh, come on. I mean, the room raider people would be, they'd be happy with your plant. Is that a real plant? That's real?
It is a real plant. It may be dying, but it's real.
I've been using the brick wall lately because my niece is here visiting, and so she's in my office space. So we gotta be flexible. It's all good. What do you have for us on the Research Minute front today, Adam?
Well, today we've got a study on one of the most controversial interventions in K-12 governance, the state takeover. Since the first state takeover of a school district in the late 1980s, more than 100 districts, including big ones like Detroit, Philadelphia, and Houston, have been taken over by state governments in one way or another, displacing locally elected school boards in favor of some kind of state-appointed management. Now we have a new paper by a couple of our EAPS alumni, including our buddy Mimi Lyon at the University at Albany and Joshua Bleiberg and their co-author. And it asks a pretty straightforward question: do state takeovers actually improve district fiscal health? The focus on fiscal health is because normally the rationale for state takeovers is not just that the districts are not delivering good academic outcomes, but that the district's finances are broken. So let's get into it. First, I need to clarify the definition of state takeover in this paper. The researchers include cases where the state directly manages schools, where it appoints new leadership to the district, and also where the state changes the law to create mayoral control of the school system, as happened famously in districts like Chicago and New York City. So the researchers look at every one of these state takeovers between 1990 and 2019, that's 104 in all, combining an original data set of every state takeover case with district by year finance data from federal school finance data that track revenues, expenditures, and debt for every district. That's the famous F33 surveys. The authors use an event study design with district and year fixed effects, and they measure the fiscal health across three dimensions: cash solvency, budgetary solvency, and long-run solvency, while also tracing the source and the use of new revenues. And I should say, they're just focused on the fiscal outcomes for districts here. There's nothing new here on student outcomes. The headline finding is that state takeovers lead to big, durable increases in school spending. About 3 years in, per pupil expenditures are up roughly $500. By year 5, they're up around $2,000 per student, and those gains stick for a decade. That's about twice the spending bump that you would see from a typical school finance reform. That money is coming almost entirely from the state. The study shows a clear pattern of state revenue infusions into the taken over districts. That's essentially just a bailout by another name. once that money is in the district, the researchers find that it is not going to new programs or smaller class sizes. Instead, about 3/4 of the increased spending covers legacy costs, paying down long-term debt, and funding employee benefits. Unsurprisingly, that means that district budgets become more solvent. After takeover, districts are more able to cover operating costs, that's budgetary solvency, as I defined it before, and service, and also to service debt, that's the long run solvency. But the effects aren't uniform. Takeovers triggered for academic reasons or for other non-fiscal reasons actually produce bigger spending increases than takeovers that are justified on fiscal grounds. The authors say that's probably because states are reluctant to pour new money into districts that they view as fiscally irresponsible. There's also an equity story here. Districts serving large proportions of Black students see much, much smaller spending gains and weaker improvement in fiscal condition. In majority Black districts, the takeover effect on spending is about $1,700 per pupil lower than in majority non-Black districts. So, big picture, and I'll end with this. On average, state takeovers do what they say they'll do, as most are justified based on fiscal problems. The takeovers increase spending and improve some fiscal metrics, primarily by moving state dollars into struggling districts. But the benefits are uneven and they come with political trade-offs, especially in marginalized communities. And importantly, the paper emphasizes that previous research shows that these fiscal gains normally don't translate into better student outcomes, such as the earlier studies that have shown no consistent impact of state takeovers on students' test scores.
Yeah. Wow. This seems to be actually pretty much a bad news story. I mean, you say it does what the takeovers mean to do. I don't know. We should call them bailouts, like you say. Yes, they are state bailouts. They have come in and taken over districts that are on the verge of bankruptcy, basically, and said, okay, well, because we have a constitutional right to provide public education, we can't actually let these districts fail. And so we're going to pump in a bunch of money and keep them open. And then their finances improve, but we're just paying down debt and stuff. It's not making a difference for kids. And by the way, we're not going to be as generous if we're talking about majority Black districts, it seems like, that are in fiscal trouble. So that's not great either. I mean, I don't know, David, this seems like not a great story.
Yeah, I agree. And it was making me wonder how well I actually understood the phenomenon of state takeovers, right? Like the branding suggests that we're going to get tough with the district, right? And that there'll be reforms. And maybe there are, and maybe that's just kind of outside the scope of this study. But I'm not sure that I personally fully grasped that they were also bailouts in an important sense, or certainly I would not have predicted such a sizable infusion of cash. Yeah, I agree. And I think the equity, I'm this really, I don't know. I don't even want to say it brings out the liberal in me. I think the equity findings are just objectively troubling. I think anyone should be troubled by them. The notion that it is sort of, I don't know, I'm reading between the lines here, right? But like that it is sort of politically problematic for state governments to bail out mismanaged districts if they're Black, right? But perfectly acceptable if they're mismanaged and there's some other color. That's pretty indefensible to me. And it's the sort of thing that it's what people mean when they use terms like structural racism. And yeah, I don't know. I'm struggling to find some good news here. Adam, are we missing it?
No, I mean, I think what one of the things that I learned about just from reading this was how often state takeovers are affected on the basis of fiscal problems as opposed to academic problems. I guess most of the time when I'm thinking about these, I'm thinking of the academic aspects of it, but it's actually more common. Obviously, there's multiple justifications in lots of cases, but in 75% of the cases, it was fiscal irresponsibility or fiscal problems in the district that were part of the justification for the takeover. And I guess I didn't really know that that was the main thing. And I think that's kind of the puzzle they're trying to solve here is if the state takeover is like super politically unpopular on the ground, which is the case most of the time. And most studies have found that it doesn't have good academic effects or any academic effects. Then like, why are we doing them?
Right.
And that's what they're kind of trying to solve. That is that kind of puzzle. And their answer is it is at least kind of solving this one problem, which is that the districts are in a lot better financial shape after the state bailout.
Can you say just a little bit more? And I may have missed it, but can you just go back and maybe talk a little bit more? I mean, these infusions of cash, basically, are these one-time infusions, or is this like a permanent funding increase? Do we know that?
No, it's happening over time. So
Okay.
it's not a one-time infusion. It's there's more money after 3 years, and then even more money after 5 years, and then it continues for a decade later.
Well, that's
Okay.
interesting. I wonder how that is happening, right? If that's how that's working with the state funding formula. But look, I think it is important that when you think about most state takeovers, this is what's more common. It's the financial stuff. I'm surprised they said that the first one was in the late 80s. I mean, I imagine what happened even before then. I mean, there must have been other instances of districts running into these kinds of financial problems. Of course, there was a period of time when district consolidation was the name of the game, right? That the districts couldn't afford to run with such few schools, and so they merged and merged, and we got these bigger and bigger districts way back in the day. And finally, I do wonder with the equity thing, if they checked and saw whether there was an urban-rural story there. I mean, I know that not all white districts are rural and not all black districts are urban, but I do wonder if there's a way that the state lawmakers and State Department of Ed treats rural districts differently maybe than urban districts.
Yeah, and Mike, I haven't read the paper. I'm also just wondering about like in the similar vein, like declining enrollment, right? Like if enrollment declines, right, we know that there are all these mechanisms that kind of lead to increased funding. So I'm just kind of wondering, right? Like, are these big failing districts that kids are fleeing, right? And is it not so much that the money is being pumped in deliberately, but it's just kind of, I don't know. I guess the mechanism suggests that it's actually because of the takeover, right? But I feel like that could be correlated with people like fleeing the district, basically. I guess is what
Oh,
I'm.
and then that increases
Yeah.
per pupil funding?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. There's just a lot happening, right? I don't know. Adam's looking skeptical.
No, I think that you're right. There's a bunch of stuff happening, and I'm not exactly sure what the story is there. That you're right, David.
All right. Very good stuff, Adam. Thanks for bringing it to us. And we do always love hearing from our EAPS, that Emerging Education Policy Scholars program that we have run with AEI for over a decade now. Some of the best education policy people in the country have gone through that program. We love it. All right. But that is all the time we've got for this week. And so until next week,
I'm David Griffith.
and I'm Mike Petrilli of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, signing off.
The Education Gadfly Show is a production of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, located in Washington, D.C. For more information, visit us online at fordhaminstitute.org.